Hello, my name's Marcus,
I'm Fionn.
and you're listening to the Recovery Hub podcasts,
Knowing the Score with Eternal Media.
a drug education and alcohol education series of podcasts.
This is a co-production between Eternal Media, Meddwl Ymlaen, Mind Our Future, and North Wales Area Planning Board.
I am here with Ian today. He's going to be our guest to speak about his addiction and his recovery. And we're with Emma and Lucia. And they are going to be asking questions to Ian. I'm Luke, of course. And also Arlo is here as well. So I suspect you're going to be chipping in as well.
Yeah.
Yep. Ian, can you tell us what you were addicted to and how long you're in recovery for?
Your primary use of drugs was cocaine, alcohol, and I am now coming up to 19 months clean.
Well done. So, Emma and Lucia, why are you here today? What are you hoping to get from this conversation?
I'm hoping to bring light to drug addiction, alcohol addiction, and showing that there is a way to recovery and it may not be the same for everyone. I just want to shed light on what it can do and why it's such a big thing in our society right now.
Is that from a wanting to help the general population with it rather than anything particularly personal?
Yeah, I want, because in education it's not as highlighted as I think it should be.
And what kind of education have you received about drugs and addiction?
The only education I remember getting was in high school about smoking. I don't remember anything about alcoholism, drug use. They just said don't do it. For smoking, it was just like, oh, this is everything that's in it. It's really bad for you. It can cause this, this and this. Just don't do it. That's all I've ever been taught in schools.
The Just Say No campaigns staying very strong still to this day, unfortunately. And for yourself?
I feel like addiction is a lot more normalised now than it ever was, and drugs have got way more dangerous over the years. Like in the 80s, I know loads of people who tell me stories about they'd go out with their friends and smoke weed and stuff, but now it's just full of so much like dangerous stuff. You don't know what you're doing, and like pretty much everyone I know has done drugs or, you know, always does drugs because it's all they talk about. And I think it shouldn't be as normalised. So having people come and tell their stories about it, it'll kind of bring light on the fact that it might be fun at the start, but once you're stuck, it's just not a nice thing to be stuck in. And it's like so common in everyone, the people you love, and it just like, it can ruin people. It's awful, do you know what I mean? I was homeschooled, so I had a lot more of a mature approach about it. So instead of a silly lesson, it was kind of just common sense. You know, you don't do this because of this, and, you know, life experience instead of someone from a company coming and speaking to me.
Would it have been your parents that would have spoken to you about substances?
Yeah, parents. I had a home tutor. We would talk about things like that quite often, and it was always like, you know, no one can stop me because I'm going to do what I'm going to do, but it was always just this is what can happen, and actual representations instead of just talking and stuff.
And did you appreciate that, or do you feel like there was more that could have been done?
No, I think they did a cracking job, to be fair.
Gonna start at the beginning.
Best place to start.
Yeah. What was your school life like?
I had what you would classify as I know you can't see hand motions on these things, but, you know, normal.
Quotation marks,
normal life, for the record. Yeah, I went to school, done the work, never bunked off. What you would class as a normal school/childhood life. I went to church for the first 16 years of my life, like from as far as back as I can physically remember to when I left school. And so during that time, I grew up around adults, I grew up around older generation. I didn't do what you would perceive as normal in school, where, you know, hang around the park with your mates, have a bevy, have a ciggy, you know. I'd done a few little rebellious things in terms of, you know, nicking a chocolate bar out the shop and trying to rob a ciggy out your ma's pocket. You know, those type of rebellious things, but they never took foothold in my childhood. I still went to school, I still behaved like a normal teenager growing up, you know, push boundaries, but I still retrospectively respected people, respected authority. I never had no problem with authorities and that. And yeah, so it also took me a while to figure out why I turned out like I did, suppose. Yeah, so if that answers that question.
Home life, how was that for you?
Again, you know, I never had everything I wanted, but I had everything I needed. And so I was a 90s kid, so, you know, when I was 5, 6, 7, I think it was a normal thing for dads to go to the pub after work and stuff. You know, my dad used to go to the pub after work and that. But I never really seen that having an effect on me in terms of why I done what I did. That was just, you know, my mum and dad were arguing. Didn't everyone's mum and dad argue at some point? This is obviously me looking back on it now. But at the time, you know, it didn't particularly bother me in terms of that. Yeah, you know, I was bullied. I was a fat specky kid in school who went to church. You know, my street cred wasn't the best. But the bullying never made me an angry person. It made me a thick-skinned, and today I'm the first person to take the piss out of myself, like.
Did you ever think back then that addiction would ever happen to you?
No. It's quite funny. I don't want to jump ahead in the storytelling, but I got my first tattoo when I was like 17, and it's the Liver Bird. So obviously, you know, Liverpool fan. And I remember being in the kitchen with my brother, and he went, "What happens if you end up in jail and you've got a Liverpool tattoo and you end up going to a Manchester jail?" I'm not going to end up in jail, mate. Just a little bit of a, you know, just so, no, I never thought anything like that had ever happened. I never thought anything in terms of, you know, drug addictions had ever happened. At the time, you know, I never knew anything different in terms of, apart from how I grew up. And then obviously further down the questions we go, the more you'll figure out where it went terribly fucking wrong. And all those things started coming through.
So in your family, is there anyone else who like has had addictions to things?
Only one I mentioned before about my dad. He seemed, I mean, I don't think he's ever fully said that he was an alcoholic or, you know, addict, whatever you want to define it by. But he just stopped drinking, just one day, and hasn't drank since. My mum smoked, you know, that's also, you know, that's obviously an addictive substance, but she stopped. Yeah, apart from me and my dad, not really. No one's really exhibited the addictive behaviours that, I suppose, define an addict.
Okay.
Do you remember the first time you started taking drugs?
Yeah. Yeah, it was sound. It was sound. Yeah, no, but it started off in terms of like, what have you got there? And gives a bit of that. There's some money. Mm-hmm. And then it just kind of became the norm because, like I said, bearing in mind I've grew up in a, let's just say, an isolated bubble. When I was a teenager, in terms of, like, you know, going to the church, staying away from all those bad things and whatever labels are put on it by whoever. So I've grew up in a bubble, haven't I? And then all of a sudden, I've left that. And then I'm starting to go to work because my mum and dad are old school. It's a choice of go back to school or get a job. So I went and got a job. And then I got introduced to the outside world then. So, you know, you start going out, you start seeing people, and they're like, what are you doing over there? And then you're like, how much was that? And then before you know it, you're having some.
For yourself, with Your education around substances, what was that for you?
I can't really remember much in school in terms of that side of things. It was more the fact of is like I said earlier on, trying to nick a ciggy out my ma's pocket. Don't do that, you little bastard. You know, bang type of thing, because that was the day then, weren't it? I know it's only, 25 years ago I'm talking about here, 20 years ago I'm talking about, but in terms of the way everything's progressed, in terms of, how to raise your children and all that, I did get a, what the fuck are you doing? Bang around the back of the head. And that stopped me. That's it. And so, but in terms of school, there was never anything around, listen mate, don't become like, crackhead Steve, don't do what he does. There was none of that or anything like that. And I say that in the loosest terms, by the way, crackheads, because I'll explain later on why I say stuff like that, because it's just labels. The fundamentals are the same.
So it wasn't something that was spoken to you at any point really about, because you were told not to do it, but you weren't explained why.
Yeah, not that I can physically remember in school. No one ever sat down and said, listen, don't do drugs because you can end up like this, this and this and this. Or you can end up this part, that part, that part. Because it was an era where it was like naughty kids class, weren't it? Kids misbehaving in school. There was never an explanation why. It was a state like put them in there.
And when it was first discovered, what was the appeal? Was it the forbidden fruit?
What, in terms of me taking it?
Yeah.
No, because it was fucking sound. It was boss.
But you hadn't took it at that point, so you didn't know what it would do to you. So what?
People were doing it, weren't they? Why are you doing that, lad? How come you looking like you're enjoying yourself there? What are you doing?
What was it you were doing for the first time?
Yeah, it was sniffing cocaine. And then it was a path that I never got off. It was like, he looks like he's having a whale of a time, him. Or her. So I want to crack at that. If they're doing it, why can't I? Because I never drank, did I? I never sat in the park, like I said. I was exploring this brand new world to me. Going out, being independent and whatnot.
Comparing when you first started taking things and going out and doing things, and further into your addiction, how often would you say that you would do things?
It was literally, every time we went out. So where I worked, we used to go out every other Thursday because every other Thursday was payday. I had a simple job in Mackey's because it was the quickest thing that I could get my hands on. And you could work any hours that you wanted to.
I'm a manager at McDonald's right now.
Right. They've changed since I was there and it's a load of crap now. Yeah, and it
It's not your fault.
just don't start going out every other Thursday.
Just had a tattoo as well.
Yeah, oh no. I just turned 19.
Yeah, and so it was a case of, it's payday, we're going out. Sound, all right, get a couple of bags or whatever. See you in town. And then it was that for, a little while. Like, not so long after me working and starting to work and that, then I met the mother of my kids. And I thought I had it so we went and got a house together. And then it started to snowball. So I met her when we were 18, 10 and 19 or whatever it was. It was basically, we were together for 6 months. And then we got a house together, which I thought was great. 19-year-old lad, his own house, full-time job, sound, living the dream, yeah? What everyone aspires to be. And then she was pregnant. So, okay. And then, oh, hang on. Is my wages covering the bills? Am I doing this right? Am I doing that right? More stress. Oh, hang on, wait there. I'm stressing out here. I need a bevy. And then bevy, drugs, more stress, da. But I haven't figured all this out until recently. Until I've done the work and I've looked back and I've analysed, or whatever you want to call it. So it was just generally a social thing up until a certain number of years until I moved out. And then it became progressively worse due to life. You know, again, grew up in a bubble. I mean, that's no fault of me mum and dad's. That's, you know, I'm not blaming me mum and dad for making me go to church and that, because when if you look at it, it's quite funny. I went to church and everything was sound. I'll stop going to church and everything went to shit. I'm going back to church and everything's going fine again. You know, so there's a bit of a common denominator. Yeah. So, you know, so it was just sociable use, keeping to the point of the question, up until it wasn't.
So do you think if in school and your parents, if they didn't keep you in that social, like, that bubble, where they didn't teach you about, like, if they taught you about the drugs and stuff like that, do you think you'd still go down the same path?
I think a little more guidance on terms of, shit, actually, I don't know what I'm doing here. What do I do? Around guidance around that question might have been helpful. But then at the same time, it depends how you look at it. Because to me, we make our own choices and we make our own way and we learn by our own defaults. Mm-hmm. You know, oh, hang on, I'm not going to do that again. Because otherwise you become, this is just my opinion, by the way, you become mollycoddled. So you're never going to learn because you've got a crutch, you've got something to go to. Mm-hmm. Hence, you know, drug addiction, you've got something to go to. Yeah. It's the wrong thing to go to and it doesn't work. But still, it becomes that. It becomes that coping mechanism. But in terms of the question, that's a bit of a tough one for me because I am very much at the stage of my recovery, whereas what's done's done. So when you look back on things, would have went a different, potentially, yeah. But then at the same time, would I want it to be any different than it has been? Mm-hmm. No. I know that sounds a bit mad, like very mad, but I wouldn't be able to do what I do now or think the way I think now if I hadn't been through that.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that. I don't say everyone, but almost everyone in recovery that I know says something very similar, that they're grateful to be in their position where they are in recovery because of the lessons that they've learned and the understanding of themselves that they've had. And I see this when I observe what, you know, we call them normies, you know, people
Earthlings.
Earthlings. And the lack of awareness that a lot of people who've not gone through addiction and then into recovery about themselves, and that a lot of the work that people go through in their recovery, it puts them in a place where they understand themselves better than somebody who maybe therapy just in general can put people on the path regardless of having gone through addiction and then recovery anyways. But that's something that I've observed being in the recovery world anyway. Mm.
I think it's really interesting that you wouldn't change anything about what you've done. Is there anything you would change?
There's a few things I'd like to make go a different way.
Yeah.
Basically, through my addiction, I lost my kids to social services. So I've got 4 kids with said ex-partner. 2 are with my mum and dad, and 2 are with a set of foster carers. Both under special guardianship orders. So I've got contact, well, technically, written in court order, I've got contact with certain amount of time, etc., right? So it's not lost. Mm-hmm. At all. It's not like adoption or anything, unfortunately. So the 2 with my mum and dad I see regularly. Due to obviously the relationship with my mum and dad, they can see certain things have been happening, so you know, I've got more contact because they've got parental responsibility. And then I've got 2 boys who are with a set of foster carers who we haven't seen for 5 years due to, well, the way I was. Mm-hmm. Not for it. It wasn't the foster carer's fault. It was my fault because I never turned up. I was always off my tits. I didn't give a shit at the time, and I wasn't in any fit state. And a prison sentence So I wish if I knew now, if I knew 5 years ago what I knew now, I would have still had a legitimate job in terms of being a funeral service officer, so basically worked in a funeral directors, which is a very good job, surprisingly, by the way. And I would have prevented all the ball ache that I've got to go through now in terms of reopening, assessments, getting reassessed, going through all the shit again. In terms of that, I wish I could go back and change that course. But all that being said, all that's achievable anyway. It's just I've got to do a little bit more hard graft and be a bit more resilient. You know, so there is regret. Of course there's regret. Am I ashamed of it? No, not anymore. Because it is what it is. What's the point in letting shame drag me down?
Yeah.
When I regret it every day. You know, of course I regret it. But what's done's done and all that. And that took me a long time to come to this point. If you would have been doing this 10 months ago, I'd be crying my fucking eyes out. But, so yeah, there is little things that you wish you could change, but that's just with life anyway, innit? Oh, if I'd done that, if I'd waited 2 minutes to do this, or, you know, something like that. I think everyone has those feelings anyway, and no matter whether you go through addiction or not, or, you know, whatever you're struggling with life, because I work in a setting now around recovery. It's not primarily recovery, but it's involved. And I use the example of, you know, there's 8 billion, whatever the number is on this planet, right? And people get through their lives without using drugs, without addiction, without, you know, looking for that thing. So why can't I? Or why can't anyone else who's stuck in addiction?
You mentioned how when your use started to really amp up, and that was when there was additional stress coming into your life. So with your use before then, what were drugs doing for you before then, and then what were drugs doing for you past that point?
So, like, when I first started off, like I said, it was the social aspect, you know, it was sound, it was like, oh, you know, sweet this, feels good, feels great, you know, energetic, confident, you know, whichever way you want to look at it, you know, give them, you know, speech, talking all the time, sound, yeah, didn't shut up. And then the more it become a standing element in my life, so like it become like a, you know, oh, a Saturday, Sunday, oh, I feel rough, need another baby, you know, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then before you know it, it's a Wednesday night and Coddy's on and you're having a stripe without even drinking. And at that point it just becomes so you feel normal, because obviously it's not something that your body's meant to live with, is it? Like when you look at everything in life, like, you know, you're not meant to put chemicals into your body, really, mate. It doesn't really bode well. but you know, we do. Well, I did. And yeah, so obviously it has an effect then. The balance is knocked, your neurological balance is knocked, and then you start having a come down, so you think, oh, fuck, and then you're staying up all night because you can't sleep, so then you've got to go to work and function. The only way you can function is by having a, you know, having a stripe of, you know, or doing whatever you need to do to then make you feel normal, to then function. And then as soon as you start feeling shit again, your head's like, we need some more. And then the circle's never ending.
When did the penny drop?
About 6 months before I got nicked. But bearing in mind, I got arrested in June 2021. I got found to have half a kilo in my flat, or bedsit, whatever, and then got released under investigation. By that point, so up until that point, all that I previously mentioned about the kids being took and, let's just say, life going to shit, that all preceded June 21. So, but before that point, I just weren't asked. Didn't care. Whatever. You know, I'm the worst person in the world, all that shame and all that stuff. And then by November 21, when I got properly arrested, I was in all sorts of, I was in financial trouble for all my life anyway. Even when I was a normal, I've always been capped with money. I was, in financial turmoil. The lad that I was working for, I owed him money because I was sniffing his drugs because he left them in my house. Funny enough, who the fuck puts an addict in charge of the stash? Excellent business model. I was self-harming, wouldn't get a wash, didn't go out. When I did go out, I didn't look at the floor. I didn't look up, I was always looking at the floor. Pure phone anxiety. Because when you're sitting on a graph phone for 12, 24 hours a day, answering the phone becomes a bit fucking annoying. The anxiety of answering, a phone, because it's either someone who wants to tell you you've done something wrong, wants money off you. So, you don't go out anywhere, you don't do anything. And then I got completely took out the situation in November 21 when I got arrested. The first couple of months the first night in prison was quite relieving. It was substantially quiet, considering the lifestyle that I led up until that point for however many number of years. And then all of a sudden, you're in a 12-foot by 8-foot cell with someone else lying there watching telly with no phone. So yeah, it was quite nice, to be honest. Again, I know that sounds mad, but it was quite nice. But then you're alone with your thoughts and your feelings, and it suddenly dawns on you that you've probably got a long time like this. People say prison's easy, right? In terms of, you look at prisons now. This is just for any of the older generation who may or may not listen to the podcast, right? You look at prisons now, right? Telly, shower, right? DVD players, Xboxes, yeah? People go, it's not prison, it's a fucking holiday camp, right? They're, in some retrospects, correct, but they're not, in my opinion, because you've still lost your freedom of choice. To be able to go out the door, do what you want, when you want, be able to take the dog for a walk, be able to wake up and stand in your back garden of a summer's morning, all that type of stuff. You've lost your freedom. And for 23 hours a day, at any given time, you're banged up in a cell. It doesn't matter what conditions you live in. That's not very nice. Especially when you're a little bit broken inside. So that's just, for the people who bring back hard labour, break rocks and all that, because that's the first thing we have said to me. Don't just break rocks anymore. Fuck off. You look back as early as 95, they're still shitting in a bucket in the corner and throwing it out in the morning, and there's 3 years in the pad and stuff.
With regards to the treatment of people when they're inside, it does beg the question of, the trauma that people go through on the inside. How do people cope with trauma following a sentence that has led to them experiencing trauma?
So for me, my messed up head, right, was all my own doing, because I made it that way, because that's how I chose to deal with. That's the way I found, right? Now, that's built on self-acceptance of what I did and how I done it and what I done wrong. Okay, that outlook. There was a lot of sorry letters. So all through addiction, it's always, I'm sorry, I won't do it again, I won't do this, but you don't really care. Because, as soon as you walk out the door, or you're saying you're going to use again. But when you're in jail, and there is stuff to use. Contrary to popular belief, there's drugs in jail, and there's quite a lot of them, right? But something just clicked in my head. It was like, no, don't go down that route. No, just stop.
Did you use in prison? So you got clean in prison?
Yeah, prison worked.
Wow.
Prison worked for me.
Well done. Nice.
Something just clicked in my head. Was like, right, what are you going to do with your life now, soft lad? what's next? And then I just had this brainwave of like, might as well try and help someone, you know, might as well use it for a good purpose. And I just started on this path of mentor, you know, peer mentor in prison. And in terms of dealing with your own head, it's just a case of suck it up, you know, crack on. No, I know that's easier said than done. Of course it's easier said than done. But at the same time, that's what it is. That's plain and simple. There's no magical remedy. It's a case of you're in that situation. You fucked up. What are you going to do that's going to benefit you?
So you say you just quit cold turkey in prison. Is there any time it was really hard for you because of that?
Well, to be honest, it was pretty much the first 4 months. My knees were hurting. See, this is where I'm very fortunate. So because I only ever used sniff cocaine, a little bit of weed, and alcohol. So there was no body dependency. There was no withdrawals as such. So there was no like meth, there was no rattling, there was no nothing like that. It was just literally all psychological, because that's what cocaine is. But obviously I put quite a substantial amount of cocaine into my body and never treated my body very well. So there was a little bit of aches and pains, because obviously you're not having that no more. So, you know, your body's regenerating, so to speak. So it wasn't actually too bad. It was generally just a few aches and pains and a really severely messed up sleep pattern for the first couple of months. But then that started coming back. The body's a wonderful thing the more you look into it. Like it is. You know, I'm surprised no one's asked me why I've only stuck to cocaine yet. Can you throw that in and cut that bit out?
Why did you only use cocaine?
Because I knew where I stood. It was to see there's a thing in addiction. No, earlier on, I said about like, you know, crackhead Steve, haha, little bit of a joke. Now there's that label in there, you know, crackhead, heroin addict, you know, stick needles in them. I'm not as bad as him because I only sniff, or I'm not as bad as him because I've got all my teeth in my head and he's only got one, or she, or whatever, whichever way you want to look at it, right? But to me, the fundamentals of addiction are you're using a substance or you're doing something that's detrimental to yourself in terms to make you feel better, right? So whether that be gambling, drinking, using substances, right? Addiction's addiction because you're getting yourself into a whirlwind of shit trying to make yourself feel better. So that doesn't matter whether you inject heroin, whether you sniff a load of cocaine, whether you pop pills, ket, or ket's the new thing about, isn't it? Ket, pills, acids, whatever. We all eventually end up doing the same stuff. Lie, cheat, lose everything at some point, hit a very nasty rock bottom, isolate, etc., etc. So there's no difference between me, who just sniffed cocaine and had bevies, or the next person who's injecting speedballs into the legs. There's no difference, because it's the same, different same destination. And that's what I think doesn't help when you talk about addictions, that label. But for me, the idea of injecting something into me, which is quite ironically funny now when you look at it, I just wouldn't. Taking pills, when you see people take pills and they're fucking chasing, you know, shadows and that, you're, oh, what are you doing? At least with cocaine you do weird stuff, because with cocaine you go two ways. You go severely paranoid, or you go really horny, whichever one comes first. Now, I'm not saying that for any laughs. That's the matter of fact. You know, you go one or two ways eventually. And so I stayed with what I knew. And plus, I couldn't roll spliffs, so I couldn't be asked. Every time I wanted a spliff, I just got the dealer to do it for me. So that's why I just stuck to cocaine, because I knew where I stood.
So what was the journey like from recovery?
Well, again, I was back in a bubble, weren't I? You know, I was back in a nice, isolated, couldn't really do much wrong life. Routine, cell door opens at a certain time, you go and do a certain activity, you go back for dinner, your cell door gets opened, you go and do a certain activity, you go back for your tea, you're banged up all night. So I use prison as a education camp. I done all the education course we could potentially do, and then I've done the level 2 peer mentor course in Berwyn. I got moved to Berwyn.
Did they have the recovery wing on Berwyn at that point?
There was elements. I did jump straight into their SMS team, and there was a form of like recovery in terms of like groups and stuff, and I'd done them. They told me to engage with the SMS team as part of my sentence plan, because in prison the aim of the game is to get to Cat D as quick and as fast as possible as you can.
Cat D being?
Cat D's a open setting, go out to work, come back, home leaves, so practically, you know, free, and you've got free rent, right? And plus you get paid for going to work. So the aim of the game is to be a good boy, keep your head down, don't cause any dramas, do as much as you possibly can, show that you're rehabilitated, in quotation marks, and get to Cat D prison, and you're home and free as long as you don't fuck it up. Yeah, so as part of my sentence plan, it was engage with the SMS team. So I did one better. I engaged with them, and then I went and got a job with them as what they call a recovery champion, which is basically a peer mentor, which is the job I'm doing now, really, but I'm getting paid a hell of a lot more doing it out here than I am in there. And yeah, I just kept myself to myself. Didn't care about any dramas, didn't want to get involved in anyone. I'd lived drama for how long? 14 years? Not that me ex was a drama, but well, she was. Again, not that I'm blaming her for everything. But, you know, I'd lived a certain way for so long that I didn't want to live again. And this was my chance. This was my big chance. And all I had to do was deal with a little bit of frustration. So for like 18 months of my sentence, I was just going to the gym, exercising, doing education, working towards this peer mentor. I was observing other people go very different ways. The frustration was getting to them. I built up an acceptance of why I was in jail. I could see why I went to jail. I went to jail because I was selling drugs. Simple. But not many people see why they're in jail. You know, oh, I'm here because of this, I'm here because of that. And the reason why I'm telling you that is to give you two different aspects, you know, because it's all well and good hearing my side of the story, but then there's people out there who may or may not listen to this and go, well, it's all right for him because he had that opportunity. Yeah, I had that opportunity because I done what was suggested, and I kept my fucking head down and realised that I was in jail because I done wrong, not for anyone else.
You're taking accountability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then 18 months into my sentence, I got the opportunity to do what's known as a Cat C release on temporary licence, which is basically a Cat D, but without the Cat D security. So Cat D security is basically a building like this with a fence around it, and you can fucking walk in and out anytime you want. Because if you leave, then you've just ran away from jail, mate. No one's asked, no one's chasing you. So that means you can bring anything you fucking want back in because no one's asked. So there's a lot of drugs, a lot of drink in Cat D. And then it's bearing in mind that at this time, the prison system's crowded, yeah? You know, all the stuff that's just recently happened, flooding everyone out of Cat Cs down to Cat Ds to make room in Cat Cs for other people, etc. So basically, I don't really know how to say this, so I'm just going to say it. In my opinion, they were moving all the knobheads from the Cat Cs on short-term sentences into Cat Ds. So all the knobheads were still being knobheads, but in Cat Ds with more freedom. So there was more drugs and more drink. So I thought, if I go to a Cat D, I'm just going to end up back on it. I just am. So I got the opportunity with Berwyn, and I've got my faith back. I believe in God. I always have, I suppose. Just God never left. I left. I then got the opportunity to volunteer with a charity with St. Giles Trust as, you know, support worker, peer mentor, whatever you want to call it. So I fucking jumped at it because that's exactly what I want to do. That's exactly what I wanted to do from where I'd been. You know, taking drugs for everything, pissing everyone off, fucking up my life. That was basically the first 18 months of my recovery. And I said at the start, I'm now 19 months clean, nearly 20 months clean. Aren't you curious to why the time doesn't quite add up? So, within this ROTL process...
ROTL being...
Oh, sorry, yeah, release on temporary licence. Do apologise, abbreviations. There's a thing, like home leaves, Joe was saying before, with Cat D's, you get home leaves in there. And I decided to have 2 bottles of Desperado on the home leave. And that was it. I had one, then I had the second one, and then I stopped. If I would have got caught, I would have lost everything. Bearing in mind, I've been telling people for 18 months what I'm planning on doing. And then I so very nearly fuck it all up over what? 2 bottles of Desperado. Something just in my head just said, stop it. Now, it wasn't me, because I would have personally wanted to carry on, because they were quite nice after quite a substantial amount of time and having a baby. It was what I know to be of my higher power looking over me, whichever way you want to look at it. So, and then people say, oh, well, is that a relapse? But then, if you don't class that as a relapse, then where do you set the boundary?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like, because that's just like someone who's addicted to gambling going into the bookies. That to me would be classed as a relapse for them, because you've got to set the boundary early, haven't you? You've got to, like, no, stop it, you fucking clown, before you go any further. So then my clean time started all over again, and that's where the hard work really started then, because that's where I fell into meetings, Narcotics Anonymous. Yeah. So I started going through 2 Narcotics Anonymous through the prison system. And not for my own choosing either, by the way. I overheard someone else who was on ROTL ask if they could go. So I thought, fuck this. Extra couple of hours out the cell. Yes. Can I go as well? Yeah, of course. Never look back.
During the NA meetings, was there any time where you felt like this is really hard for me to hear from other people? Or it's hard to open up about this?
Me personally, no, because I spent 15 months of my prison sentence engaging with the SMS team. It's not the same recovery model, but it still opens the door to some of the same fundamental things, which, you know, is being open and honest about yourself. So when it comes to me telling my story or anything about my life, I'm not really asked. Because, like I said, I'm at that point of my recovery where I just don't quite frankly care what people think.
When you envision meetings in the likes of NA, what do you imagine happens?
A group of people talking about what they've gone through and their experiences and how they felt. That's what I envision.
I've heard of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I didn't know there was one for drug users.
Yeah, so there's many, isn't there? There's many different ones.
Loads of them.
Yeah, and they even have ones for families, Al-Anon. There's also open meetings, so there's closed meetings, which is where it's strictly for people who are in recovery themselves, and then there's open meetings where family members of the loved ones can actually attend with them. Yeah.
So now that you are clean for, was it 19 months?
Yeah.
So obviously it's a psychological thing. Does your brain ever say, oh, you know, I should go and sniff something, but then do you ever just like stop yourself and think, no, that's wrong, or do you not have those impulses?
No, so the obsession for using drugs or any substance, including drink or anything like that, has gone. You'd like to think so. The obsession for everything else is still fucking there at any given time.
Oh, yeah.
Because it transfers, doesn't it? So it can't get you on using, you know, right, you're feeling a bit crap now. So you go and use some drugs, mate. It can't get you on that no more because you've built up a defence against it in terms of the work that you do, depending on what group you go to, depending what step work you do or how you go about it, right? You've answered the excuse for using, but what you haven't done is you haven't answered the excuse for going to spend 80 quid on a hoodie when you don't really need it. Or buying things that you don't really need, or sitting there on TikTok and going on TikTok shopping, buying stuff like a £17 head shaver that you wait 2 weeks for, it comes and it breaks. You know, shit like that.
Hypothetical though, yeah.
No, it's true life. I'm saying it because it's true. It turned up yesterday, I used it once and the fucking thing broke. Because it was 17 quid from China. It's what, you know, what you'd expect. And again, so this is where the hard work and determination around addiction, and this is what people don't seem to see. Or, I don't want to say things and feel like I'm putting people into groups or making people, if they're listening to this, feel like they're...
It's an observation, so just speak your truth.
So for me, right, people go, oh, you put the drugs down now, well done, sound. You're fixed. No. Nowhere near it, mate. Because it comes out and then you've still got the behaviours. You know, being a man for 14 years, I was a lying, cheating bastard at any given time. I was a cunt to my family, I was a cunt to myself at any given time. You've still got them behaviours to deal with. You've still got them impulses to, when someone says to you, what have you done today? You've still got them impulses to make up some random lie because that's what you used to do. You know, and you've got to deal with them behaviours. And this is the side of recovery that I feel isn't addressed enough. It's all well and good going to a detox, going to a rehab. You know, anyone who gets clean in the community.
Detox, rehab, let's go there. Right, so...
Okay. What have we unleashed here?
What do you imagine happens in a detox and then what's a rehab?
I have no idea what a detox is, but for a rehab, it's just, you have this place where you stay, you're constantly observed, you're not allowed anything, like not anything, but like anything that you were addicted to. You don't have like any access to anything like that. And you
Sounds like prison, doesn't it?
It does, but that's what I've heard and read about it. So where you just pretty much just stay inside or around inside where you get watched and then pretty much go cold turkey from there.
How about you, Emma?
Pretty much the same. I don't know much about detox. I just know that people drink like weird juices as a detox for their bodies. But as opposed to the use of alcohol and drugs, I don't know much about it. And the sort of rehabilitation, the only knowledge that I have about things like that is for mental health instead of like taking things and stuff like that.
So Ian, do you want to school them?
I'll certainly try my best, mate. But yeah, you've got in this field, you've got other people who are a little bit more well suited. But so a detox is basically a short term, let's just say abstinence, right? Because obviously you're not allowed. Obviously, what you've just said there, you're not allowed drugs, you're not allowed drinking them. But it's a very short term, and it's primarily medication detox. In terms of like the medication and what they do, you're asking the wrong person, unfortunately. But it is a controlled environment, and then it's kind of like you've done your 4 to 6 weeks detox or whatever. Well, see you later.
The difference between a rehab and a detox is where people go to get off what they're using in a safe, controlled environment. And then, also supposed to be anyway, is that it doesn't always go that way for people in detoxes. And a lot of the time it's not quite as secure as it needs to be. And then a rehab, there will be actual work being done with counsellors, and they'll go through the inner workings in a holistic way with the person to figure out, okay, like this is what addiction is and this is how you overcome it.
So going back to what you said before about you wish that you might have done things slightly different, mate. Maybe if I would have went to detox and rehab, took the opportunities that I did have, I wouldn't have went on the journey I've been on. That's another thing, you know. So anyone who's listening to this, if you've got a chance to go to detox or rehab, fucking go. Don't go to jail. Just go. Simple. If, you know, obviously, if you feel you need to.
Do you feel like you would have gone at that point, though?
Again, yeah, that's a very good question, because at that point I didn't really care, did I? You know.
Because you got voluntarily go, haven't you?
Yeah, you have. Yeah, again, yeah. So, but I advise people, if they do feel like they need help, go to a detox or rehab. Don't wait.
How much per month or per paycheck do you think you ended up spending on drugs and alcohol? And do you think you're better off with money now? Like, do you think you're saving yourself a lot of money?
So the answer to your first question is, over the span of 2012 to 2021, we'll put it this way, when I was a drug dealer, because I had to leave my legitimate job and I had to sell drugs for someone. So when I was a drug dealer, I was theoretically on £1,000 a week, theoretically, £4,000 a month, right? And I was still borrowing money off my mum and dad to pay for food. So, you know, if you take it in terms of that contrast, how much I was actually spending on drugs, then it's quite a fucking lot.
Yeah.
And plus I was in £30-something thousand legitimate debt. Phone companies, yeah, sound, because of contract, selling the phone, not paying it. Credit cards, payday loans, because it was a big payday loan era, weren't it? 2012, 2013, you know, quick quid and all that. Just everything and anything I could get my hands on was primarily going on drugs. I think the last time I'd done the mathematics on it, you're probably talking about anywhere in between 100 and 200 quid a day on average. So you span that over 9 years, because that's when it was bad, you know, 2012 onwards. So you span that over 9 years, then if you want to do the maths, I think the last time I done it was, it was close to a house. Exactly. I'm not even going to read that out, that just made me feel sick.
You're not going to read it out, but I will. It comes to 492,750.
God.
So it's close to a nice big house.
Based on £150 a day.
Yeah. So because so let's say on average that's true, because it was, you know, because even though at the start it was like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you're still talking 300-400 quid that weekend. So you span that over the week, that's what, 75 quid. So then it just builds on top of that, and then. So in terms of your next question, in terms of money now, well, I'm paying my bills on time. I'm running a car, which is quite ironic. Legally as well, by the way, insured, MOT, taxed, all of the above. Yeah, legally. I am taking the kids on days out. I've got the ability to give them little bits of pocket money. I've got the ability to feed myself. I don't need to borrow money off anyone. Well, unless my car breaks. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like I'm not like a squiddler. Like I don't like, because like I said, I've always been shit with money. I'm learning. I'm learning again. But one thing I don't do is touch my bill money. When it comes to saving, different story. I try my best, but God help me, I fail sometimes. But just the fundamental of paying the bills is enough to give you that, well, hang on a minute, actually you're doing something right here, mate. Because not so long ago, you couldn't pay your bills, you know, and, you know, bills aren't cheap now, are they?
Changing the subject slightly, but are you like the exception in terms of
Am I one of the many few?
The few who've actually come out the other end?
No.
No?
There's people all over the world who do it different ways, but do exactly what I'm doing now. And the only explanation that I've got for it is, in recovery you find your own path. You either want it or you don't, right? And that's where the determination comes from. You know, that obsession, you've either had enough and you want to do something about it, and you're willing to stick to hard work. But obviously, I found Narcotics Anonymous, and the way that program's laid out and what that program gives you, you know, it's given me the ability to recognise areas in my life where I need to improve, and it's given me the ability to accept life on life terms. Sometimes in life, we've just got to suck it up and crack on. Unfortunately, some people have got more help than others. Some people have got family relationships more than others. I understand all that. There's different factors, but it still ultimately, in my opinion, comes down to suck it up, mate, and you know, crack on. But there's plenty more people out there who will tell you a similar story to mine and a similar outcome. And I would love to bet my car on it, but I haven't paid it off yet. I would love to bet my car that they've come through a peer-led program. Any sort of recovery sound if it works for you. I don't agree with some forms of recovery, I'll be honest. But again, that's my personal opinion. My personal opinion's irrelevant. We've all got opinions. It's irrelevant. It's what works for you. But I swear, if you got 5 people who have been to a peer-led program and you ask them what their lives are like now, I would 98% say to you they're exactly like mine. Obviously, you know, similar at different aspects, but the fundamentals are still the same. I'm living life.
That's really interesting. That's not what I was expecting you to say.
What were you expecting?
I was expecting you to say that most people fail in their recovery.
There is elements of relapse, of course. Yeah. A relapse is, you know, anyone in life is 2-3 months away from homelessness. Anyone in life can be 2 to 3 months away from active addiction.
If there is anything such as advice or anything you'd like to say for whoever may be watching as some form of closure or help, or, you know, just to feel like they're not the only one, what would it be?
Don't do drugs. I'm only messing. I'm only joking. Only joking. I've been waiting for that. I knew that was coming, so I wanted to save that punchline. I'm only messing. I'm not very funny. No, listen, if you identify with any sort of addiction story, so what I mean by that is what I said before. If you feel you need a substance, or you feel you need to do something, because again, gambling is addiction, alcohol is addiction, it's all addiction. If you feel like you need to do that to make your life feel normal, don't worry about being ashamed or embarrassed. Shove your pride and your fucking ego in the cupboard. Google any sort of AA meeting, CA meeting, NA meeting, you know, Alcohol Anonymous, or whatever. Alcohol Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Gambling Anonymous, right? Google any one of them you want. Go and speak to someone. Because a lot of people don't speak to people because they're fine, right? They're all right, aren't they? Everyone's sound. Don't worry about me, I'm sound. I'm about to lose my house, but I'm sweet. It's fine. No, it's not. There's something wrong.
How did that go for you?
I think I could have done better. I feel like I just let you talk a lot and I didn't ask the right questions. I wanted to know more. I wanted to do this again. But it was good. I like the story. I like what you went... Well, I don't like what you went through. But...
I love that. Yeah, don't try it.
I won't.
Inspired.
Yeah.
Definitely not the effect I was looking for.
But I love the way you came out to be now, in a way, you know?
So do I,
because
funny
the way you said that you wouldn't really change much, and you don't... Well, obviously you have regrets, but I think that's quite inspiring. Like, you just get your head through it. I think it kind of connects in a way, like what you were saying.
How about you?
I personally think it went really well. I think you're an incredibly strong person who's been through a hell of a lot, and I think you've done really, really well to have got to where you are in life now. My dad was a massive alcoholic, hasn't come out the other end of it, but I don't see him anymore, and it's definitely for the best. That's sort of what I meant by I've had proof and life experience instead of just a quick school talk. I've seen it in person, what these things can do to you. And I know my boundaries. I would never try anything like that because of how I've seen people in my life turn out. and what they are now compared to what they could have been, I wouldn't be able to trust myself with that.
I'm wondering, after this conversation, do you feel it's changed the way that you see them and their addictions?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. Because I just thought it was a sort of, well, it is a sort of escapism, but I thought it was something that was easier to come out of than it actually is. I thought us just being there to support her would have been enough, but from what you tell me, it's not as easy as that.
I think my views are probably still the same, because before I was very mindful. I never judged the person for it. I found out when I was 11 and it was quite a shock, but I would never view them differently for that. And I always just wanted to support them, because it doesn't matter if it was a stupid decision they made when they were younger and they got roped into it. It's now their life, and it's just not, it was never easy or an easy thing to think about for them. So it's never my place to judge and think, oh, I wish they didn't do this.
You know, I've gone through that experience as you know, family members being in addiction myself, and I think you're allowed to have that feeling of, I wish they didn't do this. You're allowed to have that feeling. Yeah, that's all I really want to say, is you're allowed to feel like, you know, they wish they were different.
Definitely, yeah.
Ian, in response to anything that you've just heard there?
No, well, you know, you seem like you got your head screwed on more than I did at your age.
Alright, so that was my first time meeting Ian, and I wasn't aware that he got into recovery during his prison sentence, and it has given me a renewed hope for people who are in addiction and in prison. Anyways, coming up in our final episode next is the return of all of the young people over from Mind Our Future, where we gather around to reflect on all of the episodes we have recorded. We felt it was really important to give the young people an opportunity to come back and talk about the conversations, just to give them the opportunity to let the insights brew in their minds and to give them the opportunity to explain what they got out of it the most and what they'll take from it all. So if you're interested in hearing that, please join us for that final episode. I've been Luke, and I'll see you there. Bye.